We are here at Online Atelier, entitled The Amplifier of Voices. We are at Kino Šiška in Ljubljana in the frame of CoFestival, and we are very happy for you to have you here tonight or today. Hope you have some coffee prepared or tea or something and you're seated comfortable. I have to say that this event is recorded, and if you don't want to be seen, you can switch off your camera. As you already noticed, you entered muted, and you will stay muted for most of the time. This does not mean you cannot pose a question or comment. I will be in the background somewhere and collecting your questions and comments, and please pose them through the chat. Please also at the end we will have like half an hour of approximately for questions and answers, and then you can always unmute yourself, but please make sure that no one is before you, so you're not actually taking a voice of another person. I will also use this time now to shortly present you some other information that are important for this session. I would like to ask you to not leave us during the lunch break. Just switch off your camera and please come back like a minute or two before we are starting again at 2 o'clock at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. For tomorrow, you will also receive a new Zoom, so please check your mailbox and use a new passcode and a link to enter the event. Make, again, to repeat, yourself comfortable and prepare a glass of water or tea or whatever. And now, shortly, just check the timetable of today. We are starting with Irena, Tomažin and Vevar to shortly introduce my colleagues that are both co-curators of this year edition of CoFestival, that is actually divided in 2 parts: online edition that is taking place now, and live edition that will hopefully take place in Ljubljana in April. Irena Tomažin is a guest co-curator of this edition of CoFestival. She's a Slovenian performer, choreographer, and a voice teacher, and she's the one who knows most of sound and voice and body, and she's actually doing and experimenting for more than 10 years already with her voice and performing of her voice, and she's teaching all over and also performing all over Europe. So if you haven't seen her, I really recommend to join some events where she will be at. And my colleague Vevar, she is part of Nomad Dance Academy for a very long time. She is a member of Nomad Dance Slovenia, but also of a regional network of Nomad Dance. He is an activist, as he likes to say, or entitle himself. He is historian of dance and dance theorist. Sometimes he's even performing on stage. He likes to talk a lot, and he's like an encyclopedia of dance and whatever you want about the historical events. And so they will have the first session, which will be mostly about the mapping, or let's say contextualizing the topic. And then in 1 hour, a bit more, Luka Zagoričnik will join us, and he will have a lecture, and then we will have like half an hour for questions and answer. And then like a lunch break, as I already said, at 1 o'clock until 2 o'clock, and at 2 until 3:30 p.m. You are welcome to join the selection of examples made by curators of this atelier, which will be also commented and introduced by Irena and Rok. So I give you the stage, and just to say, because I like to use the words of Dubiosa Collective, stay connected and disinfected. Enjoy.
Super. Thank you, Jasmina. Hello, everybody. It's really nice having you with us. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining. Let's just start. And with Rok, we had the idea that, and with the team, we have a beautiful team here also at Kino Šiška. There was an idea that maybe we start practically. So just before we're going to start with all these thoughts and thinking and lecturing, just make sure that you're sitting comfortable. Up till now, I had a chance to teach only one workshop via Zoom, and it was horrible for me because I could not hear you. But maybe now you are in the comfortable situation that you are at home, and there's no need to be, I don't know, a little bit shy about your voice, because anyway, we don't hear you. So the only thing that you hear, it's me, maybe some outside noises, and then your own voice. I'm gonna give you just like a little, very short tasks that actually each day you can connect with your voice. So it's gonna be very simple. And let's start with cats. Cats do something very comfortable, and that's purring. They do the and believe it or not, like just try it for yourself. It should be like very comfortable, so you really relax your jaw. Just find a sitting position that's comfortable, and stay in touch with your normal rhythm of breath, and just start to. You can have your mouth gently open or just like close, and just. So we are starting. You can just continue this exercise, but we are starting to with the tiniest voice, with a tiny grain of a voice. So it should be comfortable. Like don't push it, just like cats. Yeah, I can hear the rock also here. So yeah, just like follow the breath. And maybe by now you can also just put the one palm on your chest. And hopefully you sense the beautiful vibration of your own voice. That's very tiny, huh? So you don't have to be like super loud to get in touch with your voice. And this one is a very good one just for a very basic warm-up, and also for after when you have like intense, I don't know, talk or speech, or also after concerts. It's good, like with the dancers, that after the performance you stretch. You also do this with the voice after the concerts that you have. It's the same. Okay. Good. And the next thing that we will do is maybe a little bit more like with opening the voice. So still, maybe you just kind of warm up a little bit your spine, make sure that you're sitting comfortable. So to have the resonator, the torso open. And we're gonna do something that maybe when you were a kid, you were playing with the cars. At least me, in the front of the block of flats, we were playing with cars and like imitating the sound. And just very gently, in your own rhythm of breath, you can like slide up with your voice and down. Yeah, good. Sorry for spitting in the mic. You are home alone, so you can go as much as you want. So this one is really good for softening the tension around your jaw, really relaxing the jaw, relaxing the neck. So for a little pause, you just like turn around your head a little bit. Have a deep breath in and just sigh out. And let's just go for the very few times in your own rhythm of breath. Don't push it. You can just continue, and I will just say a few more things. But then actually when you do this exercise, whatever tone, whatever pitch of the voice you like it, from here you can just stop with a, I don't know how to say this in English, barbiati, I say in my language, but then you just let the voice out, whatever it feels comfortable. So in your own rhythm of breath, maybe just a few more times, and whatever tone you like it. Yes, don't be shy. The neighbors won't mind if you do some voice noise, whatever you're making. Okay, and don't forget that actually singing is to do something with the body. So in order to resonate, to make a healthy sound, a good sound, it's to feel good in your own body, so to be relaxed so that you can resonate the most. Okay, so this was just for the beginning, a little bit of a warm-up. I will make some maybe some more exercises tomorrow or maybe later. And now, just before we're gonna go to next things, Rok, if you wanna add something. Did you hear your voice a little bit differently, maybe? Now.
Yeah, it was very interesting
Come on, that was just the beginning. Wait for later.
to do a little bit of relaxation in the morning when we are usually too relaxed, I think. So basically this year we decided to do the whole CoFestival or connect the whole festival program with the topic of voice and the body and dance. And what I wanted to say at the beginning is that this is actually kind of, as far as I could tell, and as far as we could also see while collecting the materials or texts or doing our kind of case study, basically, and this is something that we are going to present here, our homework. We realized that the topic of voice, dance, and the body, it's a quite virgin territory, I would say. It's not so. It's not. One has to be a good searcher in order to find some kind of referential material. Although we know that some things have been done already, and we are going to refer a little bit on this. But anyway, it's a quite a new kind of territory. Perhaps one thing to stress is that in the field of philosophy, I guess Ljubljana is a very kind of important space because Mladen Dolar wrote a very important book on voice. And now we are going to present some kind of mapping. We are not going to make an overview because it's impossible. Also, basically, this is our preparation for the text that we are going to write for the catalog of the CoFestival in April. Hopefully, we are going to have it live. We are counting on this. So. Okay, let's start for what did you have in thought for the beginning?
Maybe it's not so obvious, but for me it was kind of a very important, and that's the silence somehow. Because my own experience was also that, okay, like coming from dance, I do remember myself at the very beginning, that it was something that was muted, that the voice was not thought with that. And then while I was studying philosophy, I remember when Mladen Dolar wrote a book, Nothing But a Voice and Nothing More. And I was like, okay, I'm not so interested in voice. At that time was more like dance. And then maybe for some, I don't know how it was from where you come from, but in one moment also in Ljubljana, in the dance scene, it became kind of a need or a popular that actually, yeah, we have a voice. Okay, and then some workshops started to happen, and then slowly it was like, okay, on a stage, I can, while I'm dancing, while I'm performing with body, I could use my voice also. But then there were, of course, we will refer to Mladen, or let's see how it's going to go. So it's many things, and we will not be able to touch everything. But one very inspiring book for me, that's maybe not so obvious, was from Pascal Quignard, Hatred of Music. And it's really, we should not be kind of stressed about the title of it, because I find much love towards music or towards a sound to it. And there's a very beautiful fact that somehow we all know, but we forget about it, that ears don't have eyelids. So in some way you can close your eyes and you don't see things around yourself, but for hearing there's no rest somehow, Pascal Quignard says also. And there's no sleep for hearing. And I found it very, very interesting. So it's also this inner monologue that always goes around. Of course, we can debate that when you close your eyes, you have images coming and all this. But maybe something that Cage was also discovering or just like working with, that silence doesn't exist. And there's a very beautiful, among many other things, what Pascal is unfolding within his research is a very beautiful sentence that in no way silence means lack of the sound, but actually it means a state in which the ear is the most alert. So silence is something that makes us more alert and open in listening, you know.
Maybe, I mean, I think if we think about the voice and dance, I think historically it is very important that something that was constantly present in the history basically shuts up.
Yeah.
And this is the music, and connected with the text of Bojana Kunz, the voice and the dancing body, is basically another thing. I would say music as a command, and also if we think about transition from the, let's say, ballet body to the modern dance, this command of teacher or choreographer in the studio, basically, I would say that one of the preconditions for the dancer to get aware of its own kind of noise, physical noise, is basically that these two commands, very important kind of historical presence, is basically shut up. And perhaps something that one has to stress up, because it's not so obvious nowadays maybe, but I think until the beginning of the 20th century, it would be very rare that the art of dance would happen in silence. Perhaps one kind of rarity of which I am a little bit proud is in Slovenia. I just, in the anthology of the Slovenian dance criticism from 1980 to 1960, I published one text which I consider as a first theoretical text on dance of Franjo Čibej, writer who died very young, and his writing in his text Essence of Dance, that the dance is possible also without music. This is something that was not really present at the time, and he, of course, connects this with the term absolute dance, which comes from the dance expressionism. I don't know, well, are you going to continue with something, because I have also another thing connected to silence.
Yeah, maybe just one more thing, that I don't know. Somehow we, of course, it depends what you are interested in your life, what you are searching for. But there's so much, in one way, dance and music in our everyday presence, just how we are. There's also Pascal Quignard says this, and that actually just by walking, we actually started, when we as species, we started to walk on 2 feet up, that then it's where the music also started, because the rhythm was also established. Of course, it could be also before. So that maybe it's a beautiful interest or some kind of a disease, that it's a character of the time where we are, that we like to separate things, that we like to analyze them, which is completely fine. But then that they could exist at the very beginning, like, yes, together as some kind of a rap. And then when you start to get aware of something, then you, okay, you find another kind of a break in it. And there's also, just before we're going to go to some examples that we have prepared, in order this to kind of bring the sound, the voice to the body, like you said, it's something else had to be muted, and that was music that was all the time connected with the dance. And another text that maybe we also like, we are a fan of it, is Dance as a Metaphor of Thought from Alain Badiou. It's many things inside of that. But one thing that I remember very strongly was how one of the many things was how to free the dance from being a certain kind of a march, like marching or follower of a music. So first it had to happen like this, that the relationship between music, or let's sound and dance, it's more complex, that maybe we just kind of want to put it together as we dance with the music, which is completely fine. I love it also. But these kind of separations, or kind of awareness of how things are put together, had to be first released. So this distance of music to free the dance from the outside music, so that there could be the presence of the music that's already in the movement,
exactly.
the body, so that actually it's so much rhythm of everything what we do, how we move. You could make a composition about it, like you can hear the sound with it.
Exactly. I mean, in order to hear its own musicality in dance, basically the music has to be shut down. And this is kind of, I think, very important break in the history of dance. What also came to my mind is, for example, I mean, this marching, repetitive, rhythmic sound of dance, which is also connected sometimes to also not only marches, but also folk dancing and so on. For example, if we can imagine how kind of surprising sound has the dance or choreography of Merce Cunningham, for example, in the history of contemporary dance, because it's basically this. I think it was so much rejected at some point, because basically the musicality of the body and the compositions are somehow very disconnected to what one would expect from the classical musical composition as well, because it has such a huge amount of very unexpected rhythmic shifts and so on. So it sounds like kind of, in some cases, some kind of cacophony of it's a very non-classical kind of music composition, unharmonized, or
And I guess, I mean, music and dance, it's kind of in a hierarchy. It's in a point where they would they would kind of go away from the body and from the physical sounds themselves, because it's so many things that actually we shut our ears in front of that. Everyday sounds that we do, physical sounds that we have, from yawning or I don't know, some noise in the mouth, etc. So it's something that actually in art we try to go away from the body, away from something so banal as the sounds of breathing, as sounds of tiring body. That's why maybe the dance itself, and later on when we're going to go with the examples, like what the dance was going away from was also with this trajectory of this aim to free the body of its chains of gravity, or of tiredness, or of physicality itself. And so music would be something that would be protecting from the noises, from the voices. It would be
exactly.
Yeah. So in this sense, the silence is not just the opposite of the music. It's making something possible, like listening, and then that goes also for our private lives, for our own voices. There's a beautiful saying also, what Pascal says, that actually the ear is always trying to, is always comparing and trying to figure it out what mouth and throat have attempted. We have this thing to say something or to do something with the voice, but then what comes out, it's maybe not what we are, what we thought, or what we
expected.
What we expected, and that's the uncanniness, the unknown of our own voice, of our own noise. And here is maybe this grain of maybe it's not shame or shyness, that we have of our own strangeness, of our own foreignness. At least it's not just what was my experience when I kind of very late came to the voice, but when I see people also speaking, when I hear people speaking about the voice, or when they come to the workshops, it's always like, oh, this is my voice. Aha, okay. So it's a voice in some way, and it's nothing bad. It's also constructed in some sense, of course, in music. But then also now when I'm speaking with this kind of a voice, it's a little bit different when I'm speaking at home, So these kind of things that we always kind of put in the context, So, yeah.
There is also, there is one text of that Susan Sontag wrote in the 1970s called The Aesthetic of Silence. And basically she kind of touches upon silence in a slightly different way, but at the same time very much connected to this potentiality of something that is already there when something that we expect is kind of broken with. What she uses this term silence as a kind of reduction of the sensuous stimulus or communication with the spectatorship, or the one that receives a certain kind of art, in the way that basically it kind of breaks with the communicational channel which we would always expect. Something basically, she understands silence as this opening up the field of potentiality of certain kind of art, and she refers, of course, also to visual arts, to playwriting, to literature, and I think this is also inspiring thing, because I think we were talking before basically this about the notion of its basically musicality of the body's own physical action. And I think what one could also claim that when basically music very literally disappears from modern dance, and basically it didn't, in modern dance history, it didn't happen so literally. Basically it was just in most of the cases awareness that music shouldn't dictate the physical action, that the dance and physicality and kinetics has its own autonomy in the sense. But anyway, there are early examples at the beginning of the century when we have the choreography without music. One of these first examples is Water Study of Doris Humphrey, which is basically manifestation of the molecular behavior of water, and it's done basically without sound. And what is interesting when we watch reconstruction of this piece is that you hear the bodies because they start from the ground and so on. So this is one thing, but also connected to what Susan Sontag claimed, like a reduction of something that was expected from art. Also, I think that the spectator or the public or the one who watches or observes the dance, it finds oneself in one's own cacophony or its own kind of struggle with how the process of perception sounds, I would claim. This is something that I would kind of, that was basically, I was thinking that basically it opens also for the spectators certain kind of sonoric perception, or also basically one can hear its own dialogue with the piece that one watches, I would claim. You were before, basically you touched upon the notion of uncanny, basically the voice that it's that somehow comes from the body a little bit surprisingly, or it basically, it's uncanny, it's also connected with this horrifying feeling. But let's say this is I would say some kind of one stage further from the early example of expressionist dance. I would claim that, for example, if we watch expressionist dance, there is a Ausdruckstanz, German dance. I was very surprised while studying this history of it. It's that basically solos are made with usually with something that we would in the reading process call subvocalization. Basically, perhaps for example with expressionist dance, I guess it's not so much the question of uncanny body or a certain kind of voice that would come out unexpectedly, but it's more basically a certain kind of narration that is then very kind of linguistic thing, or things of literature, poetry and text that would be then kind of transubstantiated into the different medium of kinetics. One very interesting example is when Fabian Barba and the dancer from Ecuador 10 or even more years ago, decade ago, he made this reconstruction dance piece called An Evening of Mary Wigman Dances. And he was really studying a certain kind of dances that were to a certain extent preserved, and at the one point he realized that for him it was not such a huge problem to reconstruct the dancing of it or kinetic of it, but what was lost was this subtext. The subtext that it's kind of this voice behind that it then basically then transubstantiated into the different medium. And he said basically that in the certain pieces he had to falsify. The original subtext was subtext or subvocalization was lost. I mean, this is quite an kind of interesting example because it is a kind of voice behind, not in this sense of uncanniness, but certain kind of substitution of one way of composing or one way of narration into the other.
Yeah, and
So-
then I'm just thinking, like, for instance, when you mentioned the early years of this dancing, and at the same time, he's also approximately AVANT-GARDE, that in the festival, CoFestival, we will also show her movies. But I was thinking, for instance, me as a audience or as a viewer of these silent movies, watching the bodies move, seeing that actually the dancer, in this case Valeska, is she was actor, she was also opening the mouth. But me, I caught myself all the time in fantasizing the voice. And I think it's maybe not just me because I work with voice, but usually, you know, also when you watch, I don't know, some other cases of Charlie Chaplin or just of silent movies at that time where the voice was really taken away, you know. And even for Charlie Chaplin, when you see him act, of course, he was such a dancer. He was incredible dancer, you know, like what he was expressing with the body. So in this kind of a sub-vocalization or that the voice is lacking, it's also maybe I'm going back to where I said before that what is this uncomfortable thing about the voice, you know, that actually it's always kind of a little bit before the thought of it or what we want to say or how we want to say, but then it's something a little bit different comes out. But this, or like our own fantasy of what you're going to say was a little bit different, but not just our own. Actually, the biggest abyss in this happens with the listener.
Yeah.
You know, we are our own listeners, but then also now when you listen to me, you know, in some way, I don't know how you're going to receive these things. What's going to be your interpretation, you know? So just this something that maybe about the voice, it's always something added, like not just in the interpretation, but something about this kind of a fantasy of it, you know? And yeah.
I guess one would suggest also that the first half of the 20th century, when you mentioned Charlie Chaplin, is a kind of also the period of the kind of muted media. The film was a big thing at the time.
Yeah.
And when you think about this technological condition that basically the presence of the voice or the sound was still not there to be recorded. And I guess with this technological dispositif or something, you could claim that the voice came out in its absence.
Yeah.
It's also, this is also interesting because you could basically watching early Charlie Chaplin's movies or silent movies, it's obvious that something functions really good because the absence of voice, but at the same time you are kind of aware of it. And if you would basically think about these early examples also of expressionist dance or early modern dance, it's also you suddenly get aware of a certain kind of absence, but at the same time you, with the Ausdrucksstanz, you have the feeling that the speech is in the kinetic itself. I don't know. This
Or maybe when we had in some other occasion, if you remember, Rok, we were speaking about the presence of absence. That maybe this was, you know, also with the body itself. That maybe, and with the dancing body, that then this presence of absence really became like very obvious. And in that present absence, the voice, the breath, the noises of body could finally start to speak. You know, we were not afraid anymore to shut that down or to close our ears before that, you know.
I hear, but for example, Bojana's text on the relationship between the dancing body and its voice. She said the discovery of the voice of the body and the listening to the insides of the body represents one of the essential discoveries of the 20th century contemporary dance. Because she claims that the ballet body is basically dancing voicelessly. And she connects this voiceless, when ballet dance establishes itself as a speech, which is basically, when you think about ballet, is basically the kinetic itself is grammatically very organized in kind of syntax that you could read. Also, there is basically the principle of edited dictionary of it, and basically when ballet dance establishes itself as a speech, the body shuts its mouth, which is this is very, very kind of important thing to stress. She says the body goes silent because it is hid by the sound of the language from the outside, which is command. It is language that represents the basic dispositif through which the dancing body is observed. And we have to also put into account with the ballet, this voiceless body, the whole institution of this paradigm of the art of dance. Basically, that you have the whole hierarchical machinery of production established, and one is there in command, and it produces this kind of silent body. And also I was thinking with the ballet, especially with in the Romanticism, I think that because of this fantastic world that it established, I guess the movement, the whole craft of movement is perhaps the more suitable for the representation of this romantic fairy tale world. And there is a materiality of voice that would be considered as a certain kind of anomaly. And this anomaly, I would say, is exactly what comes in at the beginning of 20th century as a kind of useful tool for this potentiality of things in dance, this possible thing of, I guess, also what Dolar is claiming, that body have accent, a certain kind of tonality and the individuality.
And the body itself starts to be audible.
Yeah.
So it's not covered.
Perhaps it's not kind of, doesn't want to be universal in this, or what, it want to be exception.
Rok, what do you think? We do. We show the video of this because we are in this point.
This is good moment that we see. Jerome Bell made a series of portraits in the last 2 decades, and this is, I think, one of the really a very pure example of something that I would consider the conceptual in contemporary dance, because basically he puts on the stage the discourse and at the same time a reality of dance side by side, and also kind of fragments of representational practice that they usually show, especially with Véronique Doisneau, who is a French ballerina, and she basically talks. This voiceless body suddenly starts to talk on the stage of Opera Garnier, and this is. It's a beautiful,
it's really beautiful
example of giving a voice to this voiceless
body. Let's see it. Voila. Share screen. Where are you? Please forgive me. I'm a physical worker. I say this to myself, and now I'm gonna try to do something very high tech. Wait, why don't I see it? Before it was...
We will show the first kind of, the beginning of it, not the whole piece.
Does it work. Ta-ta-ta-ta.
Okay.
Et voilà. Hope everybody's seeing it.
Uh-huh.
Aha, we got a finger up. Thank you. Thank you, Alexis. Yeah, is there a sound?
It's really now it's soundless.
Yeah.
Right. Stopped.
No. Oops. Sorry, sorry. Somebody's running. Amor, în che presumo. Am să dăm dat kill settings.
Les ballets que je préfère danser sont ceux des chorégraphes Marius Petitpas, Georges Balanchine, Rudolf Nureyev et Jérôme Robbins. Ceux que j'ai le moins aimé interpréter sont ceux de Maurice Béjart. J'ai aussi énormément appris de Merce Cunningham. Danser en silence, écouter le rythme des autres danseurs. Je vais vous faire un extrait de la pièce Points in Space.
Okay. Okay.
So maybe it was not a coincidence. Finally, we want to
Yeah,
give a talk.
exactly. What basically
we
what
wanted to
what,
give a word to the
what-
dancer, and then
what happened in some negative form is exactly uncanniness with the absence of her voice. I would say.
So thank you, Teresa, for writing it down. I'm sorry, I was too late to see it. We will please forgive us again. Maybe we can show it in the afternoon again, so you can see the whole.
And
but yeah,
also we can find it on YouTube.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we can send some links then after. Yeah.
I don't know. Perhaps. Perhaps we should. Shall we continue a little bit with with Bojana's text? She said the 20th century dance breaks up with the convention of the silent body. The dispositif through which the dancing body is observed gets profoundly changed. The sonority of the body concerns the body from within. The body listens to its own self. Of course, not getting its Auftakt in this way from outside against the sonorous command received through the ear to put the body in motion. But this does not mean that the listening disappears. Quite the contrary, the air of the dancing body gets directed towards the inside. Basically, what it happens, it's basically the divorce of the body from language of command. The invisible insides of the body seems to get externalized. Only in this way we are. Only in this way are they exposed to the other and its gaze. Basically, she's talking about the discovery of the inner sonority of the body, which I think is a precondition from something that in the dance field were very busy at the time. They would talk about the dancing or becoming a dancer and choreographer. They were talking about finding a voice. This is something that repeats very much. I guess, of course, it's also connected in this early modern, or in the first half of the 20th century, with the notion of style. Style is also, it's always also individual style. And this is something basically the individual characteristic of kinetics. But
one thing that also in this video is very precious for me. When the dancer, the ballet dancer, was given the voice, One thing is that she starts to speak. And
Yeah.
that's the voice, the speaking voice. The voice in terms of logos, you know, it provides a sense. And then she dances and then she sings along. So it's another layer of a
Exactly.
voice. She's singing along. She's making her own music to that, you know, to her own dance. So she's in charge of the rhythm, of the tempo of these things. And then after, they didn't stop with that, but then there's this uncomfortable thing that usually we try to hide in the performances, and that is that you are out of the breath. But she's there,
Exactly.
like giving the noise of the body. So it's not just the voice. It's not something that kind of makes meaning. So it's words. It's not just the song. So it's a melody. It's aesthetic. But it's the physicality of the body, which I guess in modern dance and in ballet and in the dance itself, we try to get from that rawness. You know, that brings us to something that's kind of or connected with. Getting old, it's very strong, that when she says that she's going to be retired. But then also, like when you are connected to be out of the breath, it opens the fragility, the vulnerability, the not being on the top of something. You know, body's always pushed to go over the borders, but here it's exposed, and I loved it.
And it opens what also Bojana refers to in its text, basically the other corporeality from the, because basically the breath or breathing was kind of eliminated from something that is allowed in ballet. It's very interesting. Still nowadays you can meet ballerinas who are perhaps retired already, who they would tell that basically breathing was never the matter of something they would do in the studio. And this is perhaps also one very important point, that what shifts from the 19th century to the 20th century, François Delsarte in France introduces breathing to the basically studio practice, studio physical practice. And this is, I think, also certain kind of precondition for something to change. Breath becomes a very kind of important thing, and I guess the elimination of music is also the condition to hear it. I don't know, I mean, in terms of examples, examples from the history, I have here the examples from the, let's say, middle or mid 20th century, the postmodern dance, which would basically, the postmodern choreographers and dancers would take the voice or the speech as basically additional or one of the available materialities to compose the dance. This is, it's very interesting because we, of course, know that usually the convention of the dance performances wouldn't include speech. There is one example which is interesting from the 1930s, when Jane Dudley, American dancer, choreographer who used to dance with Martha Graham, dances in the mid-1930s to one poem called Time is Money. So basically she substitutes the music for the recitative of poem, which is kind of very kind of surprising thing to do at this point. But for example, I here collected some examples of postmodern choreographers. Yvonne Rainer was especially the first one to push the voice or the speech in choreographies. For example, in this very renowned Robert Dance workshop, which led to Judson Dance Theatre in 1960, she would listed 5 body parts, and she would list it. She would make a list of body parts: heads, hands, voice, spine, and feet, which is quite interesting. Basically, voice she understands the voice as a body part. And she basically then composed her kind of exercise with putting a certain kind of physical actions to these 5 body parts. Basically, here is listed EU, if you insist, sure, and the last one is, first of all, it's a contribution to history. Which is this kind of sentences. Then we would have constantly, basically, especially Yvonne Rainer, pushing the voice and the speech in 3 teaspoons. Then in the first concert of Judson Dance Theatre, David Gordon would sing along with his dancing 2 songs that he liked at the time. And Yvonne Rainer in Ordinary Dance, also in this first concert of dance in 1962, she would, Yvonne Rainer, basically, by then she says, by then I was simply stringing movement together, unrelated, unthematic phrases with some repetition, while she dance trainer spoke, reciting a poetic autobiography that listed her addresses in San Francisco, Berkeley, and Chicago up to her first New York addresses. Her grade school teachers, this was the second list, and then some sounds that would basically combine this with a certain kind of atmospheric sound. And this list goes on, and basically what we are dealing here is the use of speech and dance and putting it together with the kinetic material, with the use of the objects, with a certain kind of music that was pre-recorded, and then with lights or something. Basically, it was just kind of egalitarian use of different materials, materials of different media, and they were all suddenly legitimate to use in choreography, which is...
And I have a feeling that here, because of course we know that all these things have existed, of course, do exist from before. Like in the theater, you have all these different things that you were mentioning, you know, from objects, scenography, and etc. But then when this starts to happen in the dance, I have a feeling that it also happens because the dance wanted back the authority of speaking about the dance back into the dance, so that it was not something. We will show with Roque in afternoon some examples also from Trisha Brown and from Simone Forti. So of course they used the talk and the text and the songs also, like they were kind of singing the song there, but it was not as a text of a character, but it was like really what kind of relationships were then displaced. Because I remember very strongly, it was also when Trisha Brown says, yeah, it was something that actually people didn't understand us, you know, like, so it's going to be us, like, I mean, speaking about a dance. Yes, we speak while we dance, and like taking also the authority back, you know, like that the dancer is the one who will not be just seen and spoken about, but the dancer will take back the authority and give it to its own physicality and to that. I think it's a very important also.
I think it was for them very kind of frustrating. Because at a certain point, Trisha Brown, very frustrated, she said, it isn't how they want their dance.
We're not dancing how they want. But just something I also wanted to share, just very shortly. Of course, there was a big amount of dancers at that time also using the voice, but then maybe one of the most significant, because she also continued so much with the voice itself in something that we know more kind of easily, that it's singing, was of course Meredith Monk, and she made this among many other things, when she wrote or discussed about the voice, in the notes about the voice, that at the very beginning, the voice is a tool for discovering, activating, remembering, uncovering, demonstrating primordial, prelogical consciousness. So it's also, for me, voice, okay, it exists in the words, but then it's voice that kind of emerges with sound, and that's like even before that, it's like the physicality itself. And then the voice, it's also something that's always in a journey, always in a transition, or I don't know how to say this, It's a means, like how she says, it's a means of becoming, portraying, embodying. So voice is something that kind of sculptures the body also in a certain way. And then the dancing voice, and the voice as flexible as a spine. And then Jesus Rock, we just have like around 6 more minutes.
Okay.
So, of course, we said we made a certain kind of a map, but then there's the whole spectrum of also artists who, from different point of their own creation, came to maybe similar, let's say, needs, or what they were called upon, So that, for instance, in theater in Poland, a little bit around the time, was such a big knowledge or methods and tools of opening the body, and in the same sense going to the reduction. Jerzy Grotowski calls it poor theater, so that taking away all the lights, the scenography, so you only have a body and a voice, and then working in their tools and methodology was so much about the spine, also really to make the body sound. And then, of course, there are examples from Marina Abramovic, we will show you later, like freeing the voice, and then going to the extreme of what's on the other side of the voice, when you continue, when you exhaust something to the very end. And that was also a certain kind of a beautiful obsession and courage, like to really go there, because of course, maybe nowadays we can experiment with some things, but at that time the weight of gesture of experimentation was a little bit more meaningful. It was not like so lost. And then of course also from our, let's say, ex-Yugoslavian Katalin Ladi, coming from poetry. So it's a bunch of people that of course now we don't have the time to expose and mention everybody, but just to say that this knot, I would call it, like a big knot about the voice and the body, that of course goes to the music, and then to the sound experimentation, and then to the scores, and then to the dance itself, and then to something that later on from Jerzy Grotowski Heritage, the work center continued, was really not calling it, they didn't call what they've been doing a dance or a theater, but action. So it's something that kind of has to be alive, and maybe the voice, it's something that really brings you back to really, it's much stronger to bring you to the question of lifefulness and death, because something about the voice is that you breathe in, you say something, and then it disappears. There's no trace after it. And maybe if we just kind of also find just the circle to the beginning, that actually maybe voice is something, music is something that measures, that shows time, whereas body is something that happens in the space. And then these both together, it's a big puzzle that we are discovering and inventing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would, because anyway, I would emphasize or say that basically we have opportunity to continue with certain things in the discussion, and with showing, when we are going to show in examples in the afternoon with some videos and so on, we will take a little bit of time to perhaps to touch upon certain things that we had in plan now anyway. But I would anyway like to kind of conclude our session with one thought. Basically, when we were thinking about the whole program of CoFestival this year, we had a feeling that all this COVID situation in which we found it ourselves, all this pandemic situation, basically eliminated the possibility of touch, of closeness, of coming together physically. And we said that basically when you isolate bodies, of course we are careful and we realize and we know and we understand that we are in the special situation and we like to be careful and very responsible. But anyway, with eliminating the possibility of touch and physical contact for the dance field, this is very devastating situation, and we kind of connected this situation with the elimination of voice. And also because in Slovenia we are in the special kind of circumstances in terms of cultural policies, this is also one thing, that this kind of elimination of the political voice or the voice of dance community, it's also something that we would like to somehow emphasize in our CoFestival program this year and the live edition in April. That's why at the beginning this aspect of voice was kind of important, because it's present in different communities, different social situation, and it can get political
that's
with
very
a certain kind of demands in the public sphere. Okay.
Great.
I think
Good. So, dear participants, we hope you're still here. And please, now it was us, of course, talking, and then now we're going to have a short break of 15 minutes, and then Luka Zagoričnik will be with us, Rok and I as well. But hopefully you wrote down some notes and some questions and some doubts and some disagreements. So please stay with us, and we can debate after and disagree and enrich each other's point of views and voices. So thank you for being with us. We're just going to have like a 15 minutes of pause for some coffee, snacks, and in 15 minutes we continue with Luka Zagoričnik. Thank you very much. Eto. Voila. Hello, everybody. We are back. So we just finished with Vevar kind of a introduction mapping of this very various and huge field of voice in connection with body. And now we're going to continue with the lecture of Luka Zagoričnik. Luka will connect the voice a little bit more to the music. So I will just introduce him shortly. Beside Luka, how I know him, he does his own radio editions on music. He was running also TV editions on music, interviews, organizing some concerts. Maybe we know him in this field and also abroad as a not audible voice of the music, but the written one. Luka, you write a lot about the music, and something that kind of I know the most with you. It's that maybe I could say that you are a very special listener. That you can hear in music things, or in sound performance things that. Maybe for the average listener, they are not things so obvious. So we are happy to have you here, and the mic is yours. Eto, yeah, welcome.
Hello, everybody. I'm Luka Zagoričnik. I will give you a talk that has a title Counter Voicing in the Avant-Garde and Experimental Music, in which I will show you selected cases which are my personal choices. So it's a kind of like personal story. It's not a kind of like complete overview or some kind of total methodology orientated stuff. So I will try to speak through multitude of voices and utterances of different voices in different strategies in experimental and avant-garde musical traditions, pop music, performance art, sound poetry, and multimedia art. And about voice in relation to sound, noise, silence, space, resonance, immersive experiences, subjectivity, body, image, and gender roles. So I will do this in various short chapters, which will touch briefly these issues through the work of some artists, composers, and performers. And the first one is titled Voice as Noise Between the Lines, and it's about sound poetry. Sound poetry refers to the artistic direction, the aesthetics of elusive character, which has its roots in modernism and avant-garde literature of the last century, and at the same time like a worm drills into the fabric of music. It is precisely the purification of both artistic practices that bastardize sound poetry and at the same time gives it an intriguing character. Sound poetry comes from the destruction of language, poetry and poetic phenomena and passes into the realm of pure sonority. In the very beginnings, it partly follows the premises of the development of voice in the history of classical Western music, using rhythm, metrics, consonances and dissonances, by composing and overlaying sounds and the use of writing, which is used as a composition, as a musical notation for its implementation. If the spoken word is a purification of different sounds and meanings, this purification is constantly preserved in the dominant musical tradition. Thus, in vocal music, semantic elements remain at the forefront. Music complements the text, sets it to music. The upheaval occurs in the 20th century, but before it appears in music, it occurs in literature. Sound poetry brings noise into literature, into poetry, and introduces it to music. Noise here thought as disruption, as hidden layer of poetry invoked by voice, by performance, or through performance. Or in words of John Melillo, author of the book Poetics of Noise from Dada to Punk, poetry, I quote him now, poetry continuously figures and refigures noise in relation to communication, meaning and voice. In the context of information science, which judges communication's effectiveness through its ability to banish noise, poetry remains fundamentally noisy, with even the most normalized poetic sound effects like rhyme and meter acting as noise in the system. However, the poets and poetries that he describes in his book, whether avant-garde, experimental, popular, or marginalized, make noise through a radicalization of the relationship between sound and sense in poetic text, by selecting from different outside sounds, for example, the sounds of war, media static, bodily emissions, urban soundscapes, nonsense syllables, electronic feedback. They reorganize a variety of seemingly fixed or essential insights, including meaning, subjectivity, grammar, social order, expressiveness, and voice. Even more, as poets produce effects of interruption, excess, and violence, and take up the unvoiced sounds of difference, they also trouble the very structure of inside and outside, figure, ground, that produce the relations between sound, noise, and significance. End of quote. Onomatopoeia, the imitation of natural voices, appears in both music and poetry, for example, in children's poetry. But it is precisely in literature that it acquires those subversive features that are later developed by contemporary music of the 20th century. Although some theories see the turn of poetry into sonority mainly in the post-World War II period, when sound recording technology flourished, I found it already in early attempts to dismantle the words of Italian futurists, especially in their slogans and libertarian Brutoist poems. Two main figures are, for example, Filippo Tommaso Marinetti and Luigi Russolo, who was mainly a painter, and which later wrote his famous manifesto, The Art of Noise, and made his famous noise intoners, that have influenced various composers at the time. Marinetti's poem, Zang Tum Tum, was inspired by technological progress, by the noise of war, which led him to destruction of syntax. Russian futurists have conceptualized Zaum as the original poetry of free nature, at the beginning of which is the sound of rhythmic musical excitement. Zurich Dada, operating in Cabaret Voltaire, were even more performative, playful, multilingual, inventing languages, mixing them with noises, glossolalia, etc. Sound poetry later really developed after the Second World War in a broader field of concrete poetry, which included also visual poetry, and is at that time sound poetry became also integral part of modern and experimental music and performance art, making strong links with the international Fluxus movement, with composers such as John Cage and others, with avant-garde jazz in the 60s and free improvised music, and is nowadays considered also a part of wider field of sound art. My first kind of example is going back to the earlier period. It goes into Germany, into the German branch of Dadaist movement with Kurt Schwitters, mainly painter and sculptor, famous for his collage, Merz, and early assemblages of that are considered nowadays as proto-installation art. He wrote arguably one of the most famous and most performed sound poems to date, called Ursonate. The drafts for the sonata were created in 1921 in Prague, and the final form in which Ursonate was published in 1932 was given in 1926. In it, Schwitter sought to assert purely musical means. The sonata is divided into 4 movements, with an introduction and a cadence in the 4th movement, so it follows sort of a formal sonata musical structure. It consists of individual letters that are phonetically connected into sound structures that vary in dynamics and rhythm, and actually give a sense of musical work. The title translates as Primeval Sonata or Sonata in Primordial Sounds. and sees voice as primeval instrument and carrier of these primordial sounds prior to language, meaning, and its codification of the world, as something pre-symbolic, escaping conceptualization, which is something often ascribed also to sound and to music. So I will present Ur Sonate in the performance of one of the most consistent performers of this piece by Dutch artist Jaap Blonk. And this is his version that is called Ur Sonography, which is combined with live typography and some visuals. So just a second.
Fums, bobateceu, pagif, qui e. Dil rbeba fums ba, rbeba fums baba, beba fums babate, ba fums babatece, fums babateceu, fums babateceu, pagif, qui e. Dedesen i e piftilfto til juka. Rinsekete baby inskermu, dioense diorinskерmu, rakte baby. Rumf tilfto. Dioense dionskermu, dioense diorinskерmu, rakte baby, rakte bc. Rum. Rumf. Rum. Rumf. Rum. Rumftil. Rum. Brumftilf. Rum. Rumftilfto. Rum. Rumftilfto giu. Rum. Rumftilfto giu ense. Rum. Rumftilfto giu ense giu. Rumftilfto giuense giuenskermu. Rumftilfto giuense dionskermu, dionse diorinskерmu. Rumftilfto giuense dionskermu, dionse diorinskерmu, rakete baby. Rumftilfto, dionse dionskermu, dionse diorinskерmu, rakete baby, rakete bc. Rakatarinsekata, 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 ba, fa, ba, fa, ba, fa, ba, fa, ba, fa, ba, fa, baba, fimsba, baba, fimsba, baba, fimsba, baba, fimsba, baba, fimsba, baba, fimsba, bavara fimsba, bavara fimsba, bavara fimsba, bavara fimsba, bavara fimsba, bavara fimsba, bavarta 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 ofums, bavarta ofums, bavarta ofums, bavarta ofums, bavarta ofums, Bovor that you puffum, that you pub, 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 bovor that you pagafum, that you pagaf, 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 bovor that you pagifum, that you pagif, 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 bovor that you pagifum, that you pagif. Dionse dionskерmu, dionse diorinskерmu, rakete baby, rakete bc. Firms for that you, ZTVB, 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 ZTVB. Firms. Firms ba. Firms bava. Firms bavate. Firms ba. Firms bava. Firms for that you, ratatatatatatatata. Rinsike the baby inskermu. Firms ba. Firms bava. 5 volt, hey! Lange tergel, oka, 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 oka. Lange tergel, pi, zuka, 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 zuka. Lange tergel, rumf. Lange tergel, ziulentrul, lumftumftrul. Lange tergel, rumftilfto. Lange tergel, ziulentrul, lumftumftrul. Lange tergel, oka, 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 oka. Lange tergel, pi, zuka, 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 zuka. Lange tergel, rumf. Lange tergel, ziulentrul, lumftumftrul. Obitatatu. Obitatatu, obitatatu, tata, obitatatu, tata, tata, tatu, tata, tata, tatu, tata, tata, ritzik the bay, 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 ritzik the baby, 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 tata, 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 grimy, 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 gra, 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 gra. Lumftumftrill. Ziulentrill, ziulentrill, rumpftilfto. Ik, rum. Ik, rum. Ik, rum, rum. Ik, rum, rum. Rum, 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 rum. Grim, glim, glim, mim, 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 bum, bim, bam, bim, bum, bim, bam, bim, bum, bim, bam, bim, bum, bim, bam, bim, grim, glim, glim, mim, grim, glim, glim, mim, grim, glim, glim, mim, grim, glim, glim, mim, bum, bim, bam, bim, bum, bim, bam, bim, bum, bim, bam, bim, bum, bim, bam, bim, bam, 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 bam. Bum, bum, tila lola, lula lola, tila, lula lola, lula, tila lola, lula lola, tila, lula lola, lula, grim, glim, glim, mim, grim, glim, glim, mim, grim, glim, glim, mim, grim, glim, glim, grim, glim, glim, mim, grim, glim, glim, mim, grim, glim, glim, mim, grim, glim, glim, mim, bum, bim, bam, bim, bum, bim, bam, bim, bum, bim, bam, bim, bum, bim, bam, bim, bam, 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 bam. Z, YX, WVU, TSRQ, BONM, LKIHGF, EDC, B, ZYX, WVU, TSRQ, PONM, LKIHGF, EDC, B, ZIX, WVU, TSRQ, PONM, LKIHGF, E, D, C, B. ZYX, WVU, TSRQ, PONM, LKIHGF, EDC, B.
Okay, this was Jaap Blanc, and moving on to next chapter, it's called Captured Sound. With the invention of means of recording and reproduction of sound, a rupture penetrated the musical field, completely changing our auditory field and marking it to this day. By capturing and reproducing sound, our ways of listening to and perceiving music changed, influenced its production with the development of recording technology, recording studios, etc., and reproduction and distribution. The recording of sound and its reproduction marked the media like radio, television, music publication, moved music through mediation technology to a greater extent from the public domain to more private sphere, and subordinated it even more intensively to the mechanism of capitalism and the entertainment industry. In other words, music became a commodity, and voice in this context is no exception. Although it is viewed as pure artistic expression, the identity of singer, its personification, it is represented to us also through carefully managed images, stories and myths that construct it. what we have to realize is that we mostly consume music as mediated entity. Voice in this context is also heavily mediated, amplified, transformed by recording equipment and polished in the studio. It is in a way fabricated, manipulated and virtual. So when we are listening, for example, to Billie Holiday, Nina Simone, Frank Sinatra, Leonard Cohen, etc., so-called great voices, we have to keep also all this context in mind. They are constructed representation of their voices. I want to talk about this capturing of the voice by recording technology and its disembodiment when bodily voice becomes sound object or objet sonore, as conceptualized by French composer and researcher Pierre Schaeffer through his formation of musique concrète and electroacoustic music in the studios in France after the Second World War. Schaeffer conceived his musique concrète because it deals with the recording of so-called concrete sounds through the manipulation of gramophone records and tape recordings. Sound object is a fundamental concept of Schaeffer's sonic aesthetics, through which he extracts sound from its primary source and introduces it into a new context through manipulations, thus giving it a completely new entity. The chain of causality is sort of broken. Voice is extracted from its source, from body, and it becomes autonomous sonic entity. It enters the field of acousmatics. And in this field, it can be manipulated in pitch, color, it can become texture, it loses personality and gender. This last issue is quite relevant in contemporary music nowadays in times of gender fluidity in the work of many queer, transgender and non-binary artists. But we can trace it back all the way to the work, for example, of Laurie Anderson in late 70s and early 80s. Voice can be cut, manipulated, doubled, layered, broken into particles, slowed down or sped up. It can change its pitch, its meaning and syntax, rhythm, etc. Inside the institution JRM, established by Schaeffer, there has been a lot of works using voice as their primary source. Lots of studies, but I want to play you one piece deeply rooted in this tradition, but somehow retaining the voice, the personality behind it. This is a powerful and emotional piece by Argentinian composer of electroacoustic music, Beatriz Ferreira, called Echoes. She worked with Schaeffer in the 70s and is still making music today. In the field of concrete music, she has created numerous works using tape and established a unique approach and recognizable aesthetics, in which she mostly focuses on an individual sound elements and then stretches it through modulation, transforming it into extremely detailed, expressive, emotional, rhythmic and textural soundscapes. We will listen to the song Echoes, created in 1978, subtitled In Memoriam Mercedes Cornu. Mercedes was Ferreira's niece who died in a car accident. The composer had a recording of her voice in the archives while singing 4 popular Argentinian songs. This recording represents a bridge between the transitions from life to death, between physical presence and memory embodied in the transience of sound, sound as a carrier of memory and voice as the embodiment of a subject. The voice sighs, pauses, multiplies, breaks into syllables and sings songs again. It is a wonderful trace of memory, the embodiment of memory and tenderness through the presence of absence. In 1877, Thomas Alva Edison invented the phonograph, the first device for recording and reproducing sound. When he pressed the innocent children's song, Mary had a little lamp into the wax cylinder through a trumpet and an iron needle, the man was for the first time shocked at the realization that his body was no longer the owner of his own voice. Edison heard through the phonograph the voice of the deceased. In it, he saw the means of communicating with the dead. This is Beatriz Ferreira and her piece, Echoes. From Echoes by Beatriz Ferreira. And now I want to move to Voices Space, Voices Resonance, through one iconic work that has a title, I Am Sitting in a Room, by Alvin Lucier. Alvin Lucier is an American composer, one of the main figures of so-called experimental music coming out from the 60s, who at the time took a completely unique approach to sound, combining it with sonic phenomena, science and technology, acoustics and psychoacoustics, studying behavior and transmission of sound, vibrations and frequencies in space, different way of hearing and our perception of sound. He did various performative pieces in which he used different strategies and technologies, sometimes very sophisticated for maybe at times, for example, you amplifying brain waves out of our brain activities during meditative state, which produces alpha waves, and through their amplification then through vibration triggers various instruments. Because of that, he was often considered from a musical point of view more as a scientist of acoustics than composer, and some of his pieces are now equally part of musical tradition, as well as the growing field of so-called sonic arts. One of his most iconic pieces is called I Am Sitting in a Room from 1969 for voice and 2 electromagnetic tapes. It is so-called process piece that consists of short written text spoken by composer or a performer, which is simultaneously recorded on magnetic tape, then replayed in a room and recorded by second magnetic tape, and played again and re-recorded again, and so this process is repeated for quite some times. During this process, the main 2 bodies of the piece, the text and the voice who carries it, disintegrate through the reinforcement of resonance of the room itself. Some of the natural frequencies are emphasized as they resonate in the room, and the words are slowly swallowed and overshadowed by resonant frequencies and the tones of the room. Through this process, the voice invokes the space, it becomes the space, it creates the sound space and creates immersive environment. In the process, the voice articulates the space and with it loses its own articulation. The meaning of the text is gone. Text is self-referential, it simply describes the process. In his composition, Lucier embodies one of the tendencies of sound poetry, for example, moving away from the meaning of the text, from signification, but with the process also loses the subject, the bearer of the statement, and enters the space of impersonality by entering the space of pure sonority. But not quite. Lucier had stutter in his voice, and last part of the text utters one simple goal of the whole piece. It says, I regard this activity not so much as a demonstration of a physical fact, but more as a way to smooth out any irregularities my speech might have. But this personal speech disorder becomes the only trace of the person and his voice, his character of the voice that remains in the process, as simple minimalistic rhythmic inflection that appears in his version of the piece. We will hear the piece in the performance of well-known German performance artist Antonia Baer that subverts Lucier's notion of speech irregularity of a stutter to smooth out the gender of her voice.
I am sitting in the same room as the one you are in now. I am recording the sound of my speaking voice, and I am going to play it back into the room again and again until the resonant frequencies of the room reinforce themselves, so that any semblance of my speech, with perhaps the exception of rhythm, is destroyed. What you will hear then are the natural resonant frequencies of the room articulated by speech. I regard this activity not so much as a demonstration of a physical fact, but more as a way to undo the gender attribution the pitch of my speaking voice might produce. I am sitting in the same room as the one you are in now. I am recording the sound of my speaking voice, and I am going to play it back into the room again and again until the resonant frequencies of the room reinforce themselves, so that any semblance of my speech, with perhaps the exception of rhythm, is destroyed. I am sitting in the same room as the one you are now. I am recording the sound of my speaking voice, and I am going to play it back into the room again and again until the resonant frequencies of the room reinforce themselves, so that any semblance of my speech, with perhaps the exception of rhythm, is destroyed.
Okay, this was Antonia Baer in her own version of Alvin Lucier's piece, I'm Sitting in a Room. And from a room, I want to go into the space of voice between pop and experimental music. This would be more fun. Now I want to present something that at first seemed lighter and humorous, but it is rooted deeply in demontage and deconstruction of voice in contemporary music, bringing together the traditions of opera, avant-garde music, experimental composition, visual art, and pop culture. I want to present you the work called Stripsody, composition by American vocalist Kathy Berberian, who was one of the main vocalists and virtuosic interpreter of new music in the 60s. She was married to famous Italian composer Luciano Berio, but she also interpreted works by Bruno Maderna, Roman Haubenstock-Ramati, Igor Stravinsky, and others. She was also a composer, and in 1966 she composed piece Stripsody for solo voice, an exploration of the onomatopoeic sounds of comic strips, which she used to convey a succession of amusing vignettes illustrated by Roberto Zamarin. This is a graphic score in the tradition of experimental notation, using collaged images from comics and cartoons, images from pop culture and new media, such as radio at the time. She uses snippets from Vivaldi and the Beatles, etc. These images, image representations of sounds, are put on classical staves of musical notation, so they are loosely defined in pitch but demand on the vocalist shifting between moods, personas, styles, etc. The material is not only derived from pop culture and put in context of so-called serious music, thus functioning also as a sort of subversion, but it also referred to then popular pop art, for example, Roy Lichtenstein, and to the idea of ready-made of those found images. The piece is highly performative, and Berberian also deconstructs the visual appearance of performer in the context of serious music. Her image is almost camp in this performance. So this is Kathy Berberian and Stripsody.
Yeah. Blum, blum. Boing! You stupid kite, come down out of that tree. Kite, or jump, jump, jump. Glam, glam, zap, glam, 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 glam. I'm Frida and I've got naturally curly hair. Do you like girls with naturally curly hair? Good grief. Pop! Pop! Pop-a-da-pop-a-pop! Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Dong, dong. Dong. Sorry. She's gonna take her to ride. The weather's supposed to be cloudy. Sob, knock, knock, huh? Oh, smack. Grunt, snuff, glad, rum, come here. Rumble. Bam, scrank at the schrack. Oh. Oink, oink, oink. Moo. Get up, bang, 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 bang. Stop. Ugh, thud. Stop. Tim tak tak tum tak tum twang. Brr, brr, yay! It's a bird. No. It's a plane. No, it's Superman. Yes! Bang.
Okay, this was Kathy Barbarian and her Rhapsody. And now voice as noise, between scream, shriek and whisper. Often the most radical and extreme expression of the voice is considered to be a scream, shriek, the sound of agony, pain, fear, echo of torture, violence and extreme internal pressure revealed from the body. Scream is also considered highly personal expression of something internally suppressed and brought to the outside in a piercing, high-pitched voice. But something that is considered highly personal expression has become also commodified in the realms of popular culture, for example, in the movie industry, where there is this whole field of sound effects trying to reproduce perfect scream. In horror movies, scream has become highly fetishized. We know iconic scream that wants to be reproduced all over again. But in the work of Japanese vocalist Junko, this is subverted. Her voice is deeply rooted in her small body. Her shriek or scream is piercing and creepy, but somehow devoid of personal expression, of emotional content. It is an anemic, monotonous voice coming from howling throat, and as such, in its core, nature closer to noise, a non-tuned, non-pitched sound, although it is tuned. Junko is a member of cult Japanese noise group called Hijokaidan and a solo artist. Hijokaidan began at the very end of the 1970s as a performance art-based group whose anarchic shows would often involve destruction of venues and audio equipment, food and garbage being thrown around, and on-stage urination. As the group's lineup changed over time, their focus became less performance-based and more musically based, fine-tuning their sound into a dense wall of noise. She is part of Japanese and international community of noise music, which aesthetics came from anti-aesthetics, sometimes formulated as non- or anti-music through severe deconstruction of the musical form, extreme loudness and density of sound, etc. But when I listened to her and her shriek, she put me in close proximity to whisper, although whisper is seen and heard as opposition to scream. Whisper, a non-pitched sound, almost a breath, sound that recalls close proximity, intimacy, eroticism, seduction, secrecy, trust. But in its sonic form as noise, it is actually almost without character, stripped of the subjectivity carried by the voice, and perhaps precisely because of it, it is also creepy and distant and literally forces us to listen in the form of eavesdropping, which is of course partly our constant state of listening in sea of auditory stimuli and information nowadays. But at the same time, the state of modern society and its control mechanism in the age of new digital technologies, like on the one that we are now, Zoom. Maybe somebody is listening. But we will listen to Junko. I really like this clip because it catches her in a sort of a more intimate mood. It was recorded in 2015 while she was recording one record in one studio. But still, you will see. Junko, she's been doing that almost exact the same thing for almost 40 years now, which is marvelous. Let's now move to breath as life and maybe also the last frontier of the voice. Whisper is just a breath, a stream of air through our mouth. When it is just that, not even a sigh of relief, just a pure sound, little noise, it is the extreme point of our voice. Inhale and exhale, the carrier of the voice from birth and first scream to the last breath. This is also sort of the setup of a short play by Samuel Beckett from 1969 called Breath, where the time is located between two screams and breathing, with light increasing and decreasing on the set where there is just a pile of garbage. A play of 40 seconds is themed on life, birth, life, death, with the pile of garbage representing life. It is witty and humorous, but at the same time, if we put it next to some of his other writings and plays, the sound of muffled cry and breath could be just the last eradication of subjectivity that has been put in mouth and relentless stream of words in not I. Beckett in his work never achieved this. It was an impossible task. He never reached silence, and maybe this task is also an impossible task in relation to voice and subjectivity. This is a version of famous British artist Damien Hirst. Okay, this was a short one, and now I want to talk about my wife. It's called From Breath to Matter. From breath, the final dissolution of the voice, but at the same time fundamental for voice itself, we will now try and place voice firmly back into the body, into its many mechanisms, oral cavity, muscles, larynx, vocal cords, throat, saliva, teeth, resonances of the skull, face, cheeks, bones, tongue, and to its hidden, often socially suppressed noises and expressions that are part of our subjectivity and our interactions, but they can also alter them, challenge them, and disturb them in the social field. Sound theorist and artist Brandon LaBelle calls them micro-realities of laughing and whispering, stuttering and reciting, eating and kissing. It can be also burping, clicking, little voice tics, spitting, etc. He tries to go out of epistemology of the oral, highlighting how the tongue, the lips and the throat enable powerful forms of resistance, attachment and conversation, as well as radical imagination and creativity. We can hear this put in a creative use and in the realm of music in the work Smoku Grlo, Lump in the Throat from 2019 by here present Irena Tomažin, in which these sounds are magnified. We can almost hear the mechanics of the body, songs or pieces on the record sounds as we are listening to the voice machine, although highly personal and subjective, even strangely emotional. This is a mixture of voice and bodily sounds that are constitutive part of voice, but also its hidden, often repressed noise. They are here mediated through technology of amplification of sound with microphone, a prosthesis which enables us and Irena to hear these sounds and her to be playful with them and to use them musically. Because make no mistake, with this we are in the realm of music. Maybe in a more general sense, in the context of music, we cannot separate anymore voice from the microphone. It has become part of the body, part of our vocal apparatus. I will show two short clips. One is called Faces of Voices Noise, which is from her audiovisual installation for four screens, 4 channels. And the other is a song from a record called To Niche Into Nothingness. Okay, with this I finish my journey. I think it was a convenient finish because artist is present here, so you can ask her something.
Okay, I hope our mics are back on. Thank you, Luka, for this lecture. The first thing that I would like to say that you can now, dear participants, we are here for you, so now you can unmute yourself. Because we have approximately like half an hour for kind of a debate, questions. Hopefully we'll be able to answer something. But please don't think that you have to just ask something meaningful. We were at least trying to make a lot of sense. We were talking so much in hope we did inspire you a little bit or provoke you. So it's just now the time for to be able to share. So you can share just maybe some of your experiences, if it's connected with anything that we said, or just what's your maybe trace between the voice and body. So yes, please kind of unmute yourself. You can also like reveal yourself in a video, and we can have like a talk. Rok, Luka, and I are here for you. So yeah, or if you feel more comfortable, you can also write us a message. I just wanted to say, maybe if I just start, and participants can have some time maybe to look through their notes, hopefully. When it's quite fascinating with the first example that you gave, Jaap Blanc, that actually he knows all that thing by heart.
Yeah, this is
the whole
amazing.
long Ursonate, you know. And then I was thinking about technology. That one thing is also because it's available so much that actually we how I was asking myself how does it change our memory, you know? And it's not just in the moment that actually you don't have to have that in mind, that you don't have to know that thing. You can just check it out. But for instance, in 20 years, what will my memory be like? Because, for instance, when we were speaking with some dance artist, how they approach to the material was also coming from the memory experience, you know, of this absence of presence. But then in the second part, from Beatriz Ferreira, the next one, that it's actually the memory of technology when she was doing this beautiful composition of voices, of sounds that, and I wrote down, so this memory of technology has breaks, gaps, empty holes, blurry parts. But yeah, but that's also the memory that we know it already by now, you know, the life kind of, let's say the raw memory of the body. So maybe we are a very particular technology, so to say, so that, you know, sometimes we want to really keep the body so organic and kind of keep it as a origin, but then the origin of technology is for sure already within. Well, I'm gonna shut up now. So please, if you have any comments, dear participants, we are here for you. Rock, you want to sing something?
No. There is one thing, basically one phenomenon that it came to my mind with the example of Beatriz Ferreira Meco's recorded sound of somebody that has passed away already, and so on. So there is one example or one strange experience that I had with poetry of Sylvia Plath, because I mean her poetry is so much connected with her biography. Basically, it's her biography is so much exploited somehow. And for me, it was always the question: who was because of this connection, who is really that source? And you know, and then there was an example of Sylvia Plath reading her own poetry that appeared on YouTube, and in the moment, it was for me everything very, very clear, because I mean, with this vulnerable poetry, there is this icy cold voice, very kind of grave voice, very low voice, and very cold. And suddenly, for example, for me, this source was absolutely logical connection to this somehow very, very delicate poetry. I don't know, I mean, this was, I mean, connection of the certain kind of, let's say, I mean, poetry with the voice of the source that wrote it. I mean, just one kind of what is it was,
Yeah, no, I understand
epiphany.
this because yeah, I'm gonna just share something from what I'm meeting now or what I'm working with now, and hopefully other participants have some other experiences. But I have a pleasure now to work with a poet, Nina Dragicevic, and she wrote a very long poem, Ljubi me brzo, love me fast, or I don't know how to say this, and it's around 18 pages, and she wrote it in one moment, like I mean, in one moment, like she got the impulse, and then she started to write. And I forgot for how long she was writing it, maybe for 1 hour or like 2 hours. Yes, I see in the chat, I can like read it also from Dragana then. And I just wanted to say that because we are recording and with some other singer and we are reading her poetry, and we have a musician, but I'm always, and she agrees and she will do this, I encourage her that she reads her own poetry, and that has to do with kind of your thoughts. Yes, that like, let's say that there's of course, when I read, maybe I connect it to what we just started today, that when I'm watching the silent movies, I'm fantasizing the voice, you know. But in some way, I'm not fantasizing when I'm reading the poetry, because I guess I hear my own voice, you know, inside of my mind. So this, who's the author and what's the origin? And then, yeah, I don't know the answer yet, but I'm looking forward to hear what's going to be the difference when I'm going to hear Nina, or the author in your case, like reading her own poetry, and then me, if I will feel that I'm kind of faking something, or that what I'm pointing out is secondary, you know. So, yeah. If you have any comment, otherwise Dragana gave a question in comments. Everybody else can see it. I will just read it out, Luka,
please.
for you. So Dragana wrote us, thank you, Luka, this is a question for you. How do you think the very material aspect of voice, of experimenting with voice, corresponds with the idea of taking voice? When we were organizing this year festival, we were talking a bit about it, but maybe not enough. If we compare disciplined technical dancer with experimental or improvisational possibilities, is this comparable with a singer or a vocalist that learns and reproduces sounds, and someone who engages, like Irena, that's me, in experiment? Does Irena, do I have like more political voice in comparison to, let's say, a singer in the opera? How do you see this? Thank you. I will try to think of that also.
I mean, it depends in which context, of course. As you could say that opera singer is highly trained and it goes through different training procedures and techniques. Also, what Irena does has its own developed techniques, but it doesn't rely on the already established formats in a way, and already established educational systems that can provide an operatic voice with a great talent and with a great range, with everything else. And it also doesn't have this sort of knowledge that the institution of opera could give to the singers in terms of protecting their voices and how to heal their voices. Because yesterday I read a brief paragraph from somebody that he says that in the core of the voice there is something violent, something that involves tension, stress, and strain, just to so that the voice comes out of the body. You need this tension, pressure, and all these mechanisms that the voice appear. And the techniques that, for example, Irena uses, or some of her peers in the context of experimental music or in the context of free improvised music, are mostly their own techniques that they developed through their own practice. And some of the techniques, we can put them generally in the field of music, they are so-called extended techniques. In a way, are quite harmful and violent to the body and the voice itself. So in a way, there is they work in different environment and in different structure. Whether what the operatic singer does or what she does is more political than one another, well, in a way, of course it is. I mean, normally successful operatic singer has a normal job. He's not a precarious worker somewhere. He's hired by one operatic house and he's on a regular pay, has a regular system of training, of rehearsals, etc. He's insured, everything, follows the rules, follows the scores, demands of the composers and the scores that are written, the operatic pieces. And Irena is put normally into a completely different context, where the behavior and the actions are completely different. So in this sense, yeah, I think not that what Irena does is more political, but she works in an environment that forces her to be more engaged also in some kind of political sense, in different actions than normally operatic singers are. Not all of them, of course. Even amongst them, there are freelancers, etc., that are put in the same context as Irena.
But maybe we do here, I mean, there's also a context, of course, opera itself, it can be highly experimental.
Of
I mean,
course.
the opera genre nowadays is also questioning itself and what kind of a voice does it produce. And I think it is something about the voice that it's violent, not just these extended vocal techniques. Opera itself, it's like super demanding. It's super violent in some sense for the voice. As with the dancer before that we saw that she got retired, ballet dancer at the age of 42. Also opera singers, for instance, Diamanta Galas at the age of 40, she kind of ended up her career, you know, like she was kind of too old, or please, I will take this back. The age for sure shapes the body, and that's why also the voice. And it's not too old, but I would say it's something different. It demands a different kind of a sensibility and different kind of a strength, not just in this kind of a dada, that it's not maybe just in opera, but also in experimentation. But what I hear also here with Dragana is I'm really thinking about this taking the voice and giving a voice. It is political also in a sense of that it's not just being taken the voice. For instance, in the most obvious sense, you know, today we vote and we literally, or not literally, but we do give voice to somebody else to speak in our own name, you know. So this is something. Whereas maybe in the field of art, it's something that can be also much more kind of a community building, for sure. Politics and giving the voice when you're voting, it's a very special community. But I think that this giving and taking the voice is something that we always, that's very kind of it's politics in practice, you know. I'm going to finish now and I'm going to give word to you. So it's something, or to Luka, you know, so it's some, or to participants, hopefully, you know, so it's something that is the voice. Maybe if we cannot hijack each other's bodies, though I think we still do, the voice is also it's an entity that kind of passes through everybody from us. Why? Because something about the voice, it's not giving it when you speak it, but it's like you give voice to somebody when you listen to somebody. You know, this is very important. So that it's not the voice giver, the one who is, for me now, speaking, but the voice givers is actually you, the listeners. This, I think it's very important.
I think politicality of the voice is the question who is addressed by it. It's interesting. Yesterday, when I was preparing for this, I was reading one essay of Roland Barthes on, I think it's titled "The Voice as a Grain of, or the Grain of a Voice." I'm not sure. And he's addressing two types of singing, and he's connecting it. One it's called pheno voice, and one is geno voice, like phenotype and genotype. And with pheno voice, he says that basically the voice somehow, or I'm paraphrasing, basically the voice is disembodied in the form in order to inscribe itself into the representation of something cultural. Yeah, basically the voice is kind of, basically it eliminates its materiality in order to be included in this representational machine of oneness and to represent something cultural, or it basically acts in accordance to this machine. With Gino voice, he says that basically you of course hear what somebody is singing, but the materiality of voice is never eliminated or reduced. And I think basically for me this is somehow connected to certain kind of you are not prepared to eliminate something that voice does. You keep its own physicality or corporeality of it to a certain extent. I think this is, or a certain corporeality. And for me, this is kind of connected with the question that once basically Toni Morrison was answering about Afro-American literature. She said that basically what one part of Afro-American literature did was eliminate its own autonomy in order to address the white gaze. And she said that basically she wants to eliminate this little white man sitting on her shoulder and to address it and basically keep, basically with writing literature, keeping a certain kind of autonomy of this world, that it's hers and of a certain kind of community, of a certain community. And she said, when this is elaborated in the way that we don't address somebody else, that we address also kind of ourselves and this community, this is then available to everybody. I don't know. I mean, yeah.
No, for sure. I mean, something, at least for me, it is when you're on stage with voice, ally of who, ally of what, for what you are standing there, you know. So, of course, we see a person doing something with the voice there, but to what do you give your voice to? What do you want to open? Which crack you want to kind of wrap it up so that you can learn something more about life and about the other, you know. In my case, when Dragana was asking, for me, I'm not even with the lump in the throat, you know, that you throw it for my surprise like this. Luka, you caught me like in the openness, unprepared. But for me, it was like really to give the space to the physicality, because also in dance and also in the singing, through the history, we try to bring voice away from its corporal, physical entity, reality, and also the dance. You know, it was like always like up. Like to make it divine somehow, you know. But there is a sentence I remember from my teacher that actually, in wanting to be metaphysical, first you want to be physical. You need to be physical, you know. So it's just to bring back to physicality. In my case, also why? Because there are the symptoms that are happening that usually we think of them that they are private, like it's my personal problem. But actually, when you say about Toni Morrison, they are part of the society, you know. And when you start to listen to something within you, you also open that space for somebody else, like you said, that can recognize there. So I think voice in this sense, it's really something that really makes, builds the community, you know. And in this sense, especially now, to be privileged, to be heard, in this sense, it's like to what are we giving our voices and our bodies, you know, what we will speak. Will we cover? Will we kind of run away from something, or are we going to be in a certain kind of question and being able to not stand in the hierarchy or the authority of knowing, but better in unknowing, because there we can learn something.
I guess it's basically the question or the problem of not disappearing in the desire of the other.
Or projecting your own desire. Your own representation, how you want to have it, you know.
Yeah, but in music, this force can be marked. can be marked. For example, in relation to Toni Morrison.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, in a way, late Whitney Houston kind of, you know, dropped down her blackness in order to address broader audiences, wide audiences in particular. And with that, just through voice, she dropped some things that are, you know, that are sort of a grain of a voice to the black community there. So she was not any more representative of their soul, rhythm and blues music, you know. It was something else, and a lot of them couldn't identify with her anymore because of that. You know, I think now in these days, things changed. You know, Beyonce is, let's say, much more black in this context that, for example, Whitney Houston was.
Well, we have 5 more,
5 more minutes.
minutes. Please, you on the other side of a Zoom. Please stay with all the, hopefully, some inspirations. You can write them down, because for sure, in this afternoon, we're going to share some examples, some movies that we prepared. But then tomorrow at 10 o'clock, when we're going to start again, it's going to be time. We're going to have like almost half an hour, a little bit less. Just if you have some comments or just sharing some of your own experiences. But maybe I was thinking of a homework. Sorry to be so old school. Homework, just in a sense, like how to approach to your own voice. Just that maybe we give ourselves homework how we, in one side, hear our own voice and voices of the others, and then in a comparison of how we sense them physically. And then you see if for you this is like 2 different things or the same. I don't want to say too much about it, but just maybe to give the voice in a sense of listening to yourself, and that's why to the other. But we still have some time.
I would just like to say that perhaps for tomorrow, if we are going to have a discussion, we would invite you to at least respond a little bit, in order to give us a little bit of feedback. Did we make any sense for you or something? Because the muteness of this situation is really, it's quite
present and heavy, But maybe we will see that at the beginning we don't have to mute you all, but that you have the ability to unmute you, because I know that maybe at the end it's like, oh my God, now I have to ask something, I don't know, important or whatever, so that you can already in between write the questions or just kind of unmute yourself and go like, hey, I have something to ask, so that we can have like more interactive. Hey, we see somebody. Hey, Angela. Yeah, because why? For sure, today it was kind of a more contextualization, and then Luka had a lecture, and tomorrow there's going to be Jule Flier, who's going to give a practical workshop, and then Igor will be with us, who also is going to talk about his experience in dramaturgy. Boh. Eto.
I do have a question, actually.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you all so much. It's super fascinating to hear your discussions on dance and voice, especially the examples that you offer. And I was wondering, I was really impressed, actually, Luka, with your selection of sound poets to include both in terms of a kind of diversity of gender identities and also locations in the world. And I couldn't help but wonder if there are other contemporary practitioners within the Balkans in particular who are also exploring this terrain between movement and voice, or the choreographies of our vocal folks.
Yeah, in our region, I think we have like in this sort of field of free improvised music, we have a lot of younger voices now working in this field, experimenting with voice. In Slovenia, I would say we have it for about a sextet or something. We have also artists that we know from Serbia, Svetlana Spajic. She works more in a concept of traditional folk music, but she also works in the field of contemporary performance, experimental music. She worked with Marina Abramovic. She performed in the famous piece "The Death of Marina Abramovic." She was part of that with Anthony Haggerty, and she worked with well-known German contemporary ensemble Zeitkratzer, etc. So she is quite present on the international circuit. So yeah, we have quite a lot of them, some young and some that are working.
And one very famous and important poet, because before we briefly mentioned, and with Rok we will show some examples, it's Katalin Ladik. In this ex-Yugoslavian field, she was really opening the field, so to say, coming from poetry, but really I would call it like this artistic obsession that, of course, it's connected with courage, because what she was kind of paying for that was because she exposed her body. She was performing as a poet, also naked. She was really going into different fields. There are some pieces that she's like in a kind of a cave, kind of a costume, drumming on the drum, kind of a being crazy cave woman, but actually going into the performance. And I mean, of course, she was aware that she's dancing. That was not kind of her aim, but byproduct that she was doing was also referring really to the dance then, and then to the scream, and she was making her own sonic poetry. So, yeah, unfortunately, we don't have 2 months, so we only have two days. But thank you for your question, Angela, and it's 1 o'clock, so let's have like a lunch break, and at 2 o'clock we will meet. We will have some movies. We promise that the sound will work, and then of course if you will have any question in between, we will take this time and speak about it. Dobro. We have a pause. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening.